So, this is the cup I'm going to use today. I have my pot of tea. Oh, sorry. And they don't exactly match because this one has like one of those like forget-me-nots on it. And the cup says Royal Albert. And this one has little roses on it. See? Or they look like roses to me. They could be something else. What do you think? I think it looks like roses. And almost like little hearts on the outside. But this one says bar clay. So it's a different thing. I saw them at the thrift store. But this one was just the cup and no plate. And then this one was just the plate and no cup. And they were both blue, so I paired them together. I mixed the honey tea with chamomile, so that's what I have today. I made sure not to fill it too much, because last time I had a tea in a little cup, it kind of spilled over. So I have a few more stories and antique fairy tales. I'm not sure how many more stories. Let me check before I get started. No, that's the illustration. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 more stories, because the last one was that I read was Cinderella. So 6 more stories. That one's marked. Not sure why. So the golden-headed fish is the one that's next. I have a new bookmark. It came with the Valentine's Day card my mom gave me. It's pretty. So, anyways. Once upon a time, there lived in Egypt a king who lost his sight from a bad illness. Of course, he was very unhappy, and became more so as months passed, and all the best doctors in the land were unable to cure him. The poor man grew so thin from misery that everyone thought he was going to die, and the prince, his only son, thought so too. Great was, therefore, the rejoicing through Egypt when a traveler arrived in a boat down the river Nile, and after questioning the people as to the reason of their downcast looks, declared that he was a court physician to a king in a far country, and would, if allowed, examine the eyes of the blind man. He was at once admitted into the royal presence, and after a few minutes of careful study, announced that the case, though very serious, was not quite hopeless. Somewhere in the great sea, he said, there exists a golden-headed fish. If you can manage to catch this creature, bring it to me, and I will I will prepare an ointment from its blood, which will restore your sight. For 100 days I will wait here, but if at the end of that time the fish should still be uncaught, I must return to my own master. The next morning the young prince set forth in quest of the fish, taking with him 100 men, each man carrying a net. Quite a little fleet of boats was awaiting them, and in these they sailed into the middle of the great sea. During 3 months they labored diligently from sunrise to sunset, but though they caught large multitudes of fishes, not one of them had a golden head. I'm gonna get some tea. Just keep the camera on the illustration. It is quite useless now, said the prince on the very last night. Even if we find it this evening, the 100 days will be over in an hour, and long before we could reach the Egyptian capital, the doctor will be on his way home. Still I will go out again and cast the net once more myself. And so he did, and at that very moment that the 100 days were up, he drew in the net with the golden-headed fish, entangled in its meshes. Sorry, my dog was sneezing. Bless you. Sorry. Success has come, but as it happens often, it is too late, murmured the young man who had studied in the schools of philosophy. My dog has allergies. Bless you. But all the same, put the fish in that vessel full of water, and we will take it back to show my father that we have done what we could. But when he drew near the fish, it looked up at him with such piteous eyes that he could not make up his mind to condemn it to death. For he knew well that though the doctors of his own country were ignorant of the secret of the ointment, they would do all in their power to extract something from the fish's blood. So he picked up the prize of so much labor and threw it back into the sea, and then began his journey back to the palace. When at last he reached it, he found the king in a high fever caused by his disappointment, and he refused to believe the story told him by his son. "Your head shall pay for it, your head shall pay for it," cried he. And he bade the courtiers instantly summon the executioner to the palace. But of course somebody ran at once to the queen and told her of the king's order. She put common clothes on the prince and filled his pockets with gold, and hurried him on board a ship which was sailing that night for a distant land. "Your father will repent some day, and then he will be thankful to know that you are alive," said she. "But one last counsel I will give you, and that is, take no man into your service who desires to pay it every month." The young man thought this advice rather odd. If the servant had to be paid anyhow, he did not understand what difference it could make, whether it was by the year or by the month. However, he had many times proved that his mother was wiser than he, so he promised obedience. After a voyage of several weeks, he arrived at the island of which his mother had spoken. It was full of hills and woods and flowers, and beautiful white houses stood everywhere in gardens. What a charming spot to live in, thought the prince, and he lost no time in buying one of the prettiest of the dwellings. I'm going to leave it on the picture for a second. Then servants came, pressing to offer their services, but as they all declared that they must have payment at the end of every month, the young man, who remembered his mother's words, declined to have anything to say to them. At length one morning an Arab appeared, and begged that the prince would engage him. "And what wages do you ask?" inquired the prince, when he had questioned the newcomer and found him suitable. "I do not want money," answered the Arab. "At the end of a year you can see what my services are worth to you, and pay me in any way you like." And the young man was pleased, and took the Arab for his servant. Now, although no one would have guessed it from the look of the side of the island where the prince had landed, the other part was a complete desert, owing to the ravages of a horrible monster, which came up from the sea and devoured all the corn and cattle. The governor had sent bands of soldiers to lie in wait for the creature in order to kill it, but somehow no one ever happened to be awake at the moment that the ravages were committed. It was in vain that all the sleepy soldiers were always punished severely. The same thing invariably occurred next time, and at last heralds were sent throughout the island to offer a great reward to the man who could slay the monster. As soon as the Arab heard the news, he went straight to the governor's palace. "If a master can succeed in killing the monster, what reward will you give him?" asked he. "My daughter, and anything besides that he chooses," answered the governor. But the Arab shook his head. "Give him your daughter and keep your wealth," said he. but henceforward let her share in your gains, whatever they are. It is well, said the governor, and ordered a deed to be prepared, which was signed by the both of them.